If you're planning to visit Germany, you may have heard that in this country, cash is king. You cannot survive without knowing your way around banknotes and coins. And visitors from countries that have already pretty much gone completely cashless certainly do report seeing an awful lot of cash being used. But what does this mean for you? Should you just leave your cards at home and resign yourself to the fact that Germany is still living in the year 1960? Or is the country just a bit more advanced than some reports would have you believe? Well, although cash is still quite common in Germany, at least compared to some other countries, things have been changing in recent years. The basic situation at the moment is this. You can certainly survive without cash, but it might be useful to carry some all the same. One issue, though, is that there are at least 3 types of card payment available, and one of them is exclusive to Germany. Not all places accept all of them, and some still accept none. These are credit cards, debit cards, and something called Girocard. Credit cards work by lending you money, which you then pay back, perhaps at the end of the month. These days, these repayments happen automatically, so you don't have to worry about them too much. But the credit in credit card refers to the fact that you are, technically speaking, taking out a loan. In Germany, where credit cards are accepted, it's almost certainly going to be MasterCard and Visa, sometimes also JCB. If you have, for example, an American Express card, you're probably going to be out of luck. Also, do make sure that your card uses the chip and PIN system, as that's the only type that will be accepted. Debit cards look like credit cards, and in fact, once again, you have a choice between MasterCard and Visa. But they work on a different principle. Instead of lending you money that you repay, they simply take the money directly out of your bank account. And even though it might at first sight seem as if credit cards and debit cards are the same thing, they are not interchangeable. Knowing which one you need to use is going to be important. The third type of card is the good old Girocard, very often known by its original name, the EC card. This is the one that's unique to Germany, and in fact, it's been around since the 1980s. It is basically a debit card, but instead of being operated by giant multinational corporations, it uses a system that was developed by the German Banking Industry Committee. While the Girocard used to be automatically issued with every current account, some banks have now started phasing it out in favor of either MasterCard or Visa, presumably because the Girocard system simply doesn't work outside of Germany. But in Germany, small businesses still prefer it because the transaction fees are lower, and most of their German customers still have one. Germans do like to use cash in part because it's guaranteed to be anonymous. Your bank has no way of knowing what you're spending cash on, and so cannot secretly build up a profile of your spending habits which it can then illegally sell to third parties or to the government. But even so, cash is no longer really king. In 2023, cash payments made up about 35% of transactions in Germany. About 60% were card payments, and the most popular card used was Girocard. There is a definite trend away from cash. That does not mean that it's all plain sailing. At one restaurant I went to last year, I had already ordered my meal when I suddenly realized that I was sitting right next to a sign that said cash only. Fortunately, I did have enough cash on me to pay for my meal, but you really do need to watch for signs like this. Cash is very nearly always acceptable. Businesses are in fact legally required to accept it unless they put up very prominent signs indicating otherwise. Accepting other forms of payment is something that businesses can do to make life easier for their customers. It's sometimes assumed that a business that accepts only cash does so in order to evade taxes. Now that might well be true in many cases, but a small business that is already legally required to bear the cost of handling cash might genuinely feel that adding on top of that all the various fees associated with card payments is just too much. Just make sure that you get a proper receipt. But cashless payments are becoming a lot more commonly accepted, and certainly businesses that get a lot of custom from tourists are much more likely these days to accept cards. But not all of them accept all types of card. Credit cards are quite rarely used in Germany, except in cases where a business might need to put a pre-authorization on a card in order to pay for possible incidental damages. This means in practice that you may need to supply a credit card number in order to book a hotel room or hire a car, even if you actually pay by some other method. But when it comes to cashless for paying for meals or buying souvenirs, a debit card or a Giro card is usually the norm. The problem is that in some places it's either one or the other, but not both. I have been in stores that only accept MasterCard or Visa, and I have been in stores that only accept Girocard. It is standard practice to put up signs explaining exactly which payment methods are accepted or not accepted, especially in places that have in the past had to deal with confused tourists. Some businesses might only accept card payments over a specific amount, usually somewhere between 10 and 50 euros. Apparently, this goes against the terms of service of both MasterCard and Visa, but it's not against the law, which means that card companies can't realistically do much to actually enforce this particular rule. And they don't bother trying. Businesses do this because transaction charges can be high enough to completely obliterate any profits they might make on small and cheap purchases. And this is a real problem for very small shops or kiosks, where people might typically just drop by to pick up a Snickers and a bottle of water. Cash might also be useful for tipping servers in restaurants, because it's quite likely that a cashless tip will just go straight to the business and never find its way back to the server that you're trying to tip. And most toilets will expect you to pay somewhere between 50 cents and €1. And while some of them may have turnstiles that do accept cards, in many cases it's an honor system and you're supposed to leave a coin in a dish on your way out. Of course, in that case, it really is just a recommended tip for the attendant, so nobody's going to call the police on you if you walk out without paying. But I do like to pay the recommended amount because, let's face it, cleaning toilets is an unpleasant and badly paid job. So in conclusion, it's not really true anymore to say that in Germany cash is king, but it might still be useful to take a little cash with you because you're probably going to need it. Oh, and since I mentioned tipping, I recently made a video on exactly that subject, which you should find just down there.